Game day rush. Leo wrestled with his tie in the review mirror, the knot refusing to cooperate. He was already 10 minutes late, and Maria would have his hide. He could practically feel her laser-like stare burning a hole in his back. The stadium loomed ahead, a concrete and steel behemoth buzzing with anticipation. Today was the season opener, and the air crackled with an energy that both excited and terrified him. He slammed the car door, grabbed his worn-out backpack, and sprinted towards the employee entrance, dodging oblivious pedestrians in team jerseys. He swiped his ID card, the beep feeling accusatory in the echoing corridor. He burst into the attendant break room, already picturing Maria's disapproving frown. "Maxwell!" Her voice sliced through the air like a well-aimed paper airplane. "You're late." "Again?" Maria stood with her arms crossed, her crisp uniform immaculate, her dark eyes unwavering. Leo swallowed hard, trying to formulate an excuse, but she cut him off. "Save it. Just get to your post. And remember what I told you, these people are our guests. Treat them with respect, even the obnoxious ones." She paused, her gaze softening slightly. "We're here to make their game day experience a good one. Understand?" "Yes, Maria," Leo mumbled, grabbing a stack of programs and a handheld ticket scanner. He knew she had a soft spot for veterans, often giving them the best seats. He wished he had served, maybe then he'd be on her good side. But college debt had loomed, and the military hadn't seemed like the answer then. Now, with his bank account perpetually teetering on the edge of overdraft, he wondered if he'd made the right choice. He hurried to his assigned gate, the roar of the crowd growing louder with each step. As he took his position, he scanned the arriving throng. A group of college kids, faces painted in team colors, stumbled past, reeking of cheap beer. Leo grimaced. He hated dealing with the rowdy ones. Then came a family, the kids clutching foam fingers and wearing oversized jerseys, their faces alight with excitement. He felt a flicker of something akin to warmth. He could relate to that kind of unbridled enthusiasm. A woman in designer jeans and sunglasses, talking loudly on her phone, cut the line, flashing a VIP pass. Leo rolled his eyes. Entitled. Always the entitled ones. He imagined her complaining about the lack of legroom in her premium box. Then, a man shuffled slowly towards him. He was older, his face etched with wrinkles, his clothes worn and faded. He leaned heavily on a cane, his gaze distant. Leo sighed inwardly. Great. Just what he needed, someone who was going to hold up the line. He hoped the guy even had a valid ticket. He looked like he probably got lost on the way to the retirement home. The Scruffy ticket. Mr. Thompson shuffled down the aisle, a small, worn duffel bag bumping against his leg. He squinted, the overhead lights reflecting off the thick lenses of his glasses. The numbers above the seat swam before him, blurring into an indecipherable mess. He stopped, consulted the crumpled piece of paper in his hand, then looked up again, bewildered. The air in the arena was thick with the smell of popcorn and anticipation. Leo Maxwell watched him from his post near the gate, his jaw tight. He hated stragglers, especially ones who looked like they'd wandered in off the street. Mr. Thompson's tweed jacket was rumpled, his tie askew, and a smudge of something that looked suspiciously like grease decorated his cheek. Definitely not box seat material. Lost, are we? Leo called out, his voice sharper than he intended. He imagined Mr. Thompson was probably in the nosebleeds, if he even had a ticket to begin with. Probably trying to sneak in. The thought made his pulse quicken with annoyance. He dealt with enough freeloaders tonight. Mr. Henderson would have his head if he let one slip by. Mr. Thompson blinked, turning towards Leo with a slow, deliberate movement. Just a little trouble finding my seat, son, he said, his voice raspy but polite. Leo crossed his arms, leaning against the metal barrier. Let's see that ticket then, old-timer. He kept his tone condescending. The sooner he could get this guy situated, or escorted out, the better. Mr. Thompson reached into his jacket pocket, his movement slow and deliberate. He produced a ticket, or rather, what was left of one. It was a faded, dog-eared rectangle of paper, the edges frayed and softened with age. The print was barely legible, the seat number smudged almost beyond recognition. Leo's eyes narrowed. It looked like it had been through a war. He snatched it, holding it up to the light, trying to decipher the faded ink. The paper felt thin and fragile in his hand, like ancient parchment. This can't be right, Leo stammered, his confidence faltering. This thing looks older than I am. Where did you even get this? He could just make out the section number, but the row and seat, it was practically gone. Mr. Thompson merely stared back, his expression unreadable. It was issued to me, he stated simply, his voice calm and steady. Is there a problem? Leo swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. He glanced around, hoping Mr. Henderson wasn't watching. This was a disaster. He couldn't just turn the guy away, he could barely read the ticket. But what if it was fake? What if it was some kind of elaborate scam? His stomach churned with anxiety. He hated these kinds of situations. Impatiently, he gestured toward the side. Just wait here a minute, he mumbled, and hurried towards his supervisor to ask for guidance. Wrong way, old-timer. Wrong way, old-timer, Leo barked, not bothering to look up from his phone as Mr. Thompson shuffled past the velvet rope. The man moved with the careful precision of someone navigating a minefield, each step measured, his gaze fixed on the ground. Leo smelled vaguely of stale energy drink and unfulfilled potential. Mr. Thompson stopped, his hand resting lightly on the rope. Excuse me. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. Leo finally glanced up, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. He took in Mr. Thompson's faded denim jacket, the worn leather boots, the silver hair escaping from beneath a weathered baseball cap. This area's for VIPs. You got a pass. Mr. Thompson reached into his breast pocket, his movement slow but deliberate. He produced a crisp, white ticket. I believe so. Leo snatched the ticket, his eye scanning it dismissively. Nope. General admission. Back that way. He pointed with his chin towards a distant section of the stadium, a sea of empty blue seats under the harsh afternoon sun. But this ticket says Section A, Row 1, Seat 1, Mr. Thompson protested mildly, his brow furrowed. He made no move to reclaim the ticket. Leo scoffed, handing it back with a flick of his wrist. Lady must have made a mistake. Happens all the time. Now move along, Gramps. We got a show to start. He tapped impatiently on his phone screen. Mr. Thompson hesitated, his gaze sweeping over the plush, unoccupied seats of the VIP section. There was a quiet dignity in his stance, a refusal to be hurried or intimidated. But he also understood the futility of arguing with someone who had already made up their mind. Very well, he said softly, turning and walking in the direction Leo had indicated. His shoulders, though stooped with age, remained squared. He clutched his ticket tightly in his hand. Leo watched him go, a smug smirk playing on his lips. Another one bites the dust, he muttered to himself, returning to his game. He didn't notice the almost imperceptible sigh that escaped Mr. Thompson's lips, nor the flicker of sadness in his eyes. The general admission section was nearly deserted. The air hung heavy with the scent of popcorn and dust. Mr. Thompson found the row Leo had gestured towards and slowly made his way to the first seat. It was cracked and faded, offering little comfort. He sat down heavily, the metal frame groaning beneath his weight. He looked out at the vast, empty stadium, the noise of the pre-game festivities a distant hum. The sun beat down on him, relentless and unforgiving. He pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes, shielding himself from the glare. For a moment, he simply sat there, a solitary figure in a sea of blue plastic, his gaze fixed on the American flag fluttering proudly above the scoreboard, a silent observer waiting for the show to begin. The loneliness sat heavy around him, a familiar cloak woven from years of quiet sacrifice. Alone in the stands. The roar slammed into Leo, an invisible wave compressing his lungs. Above, bursts of pyrotechnic color slashed the darkening canvas of the sky, ruby streaks, molten gold explosions. Down on the verdant expanse, helmets flashed under the bright stadium floods as the home team surged forward. The stands vibrated with a kinetic energy, a kaleidoscope of team colors and elated faces. From his post at the VIP entrance, Leo instinctively tightened his grip on the walkie-talkie secured to his belt. This was the pulse, the reason he tolerated the endless hours, the fervent fans, the occasional inebriated attempt to trespass. It was a contagion of exhilaration. Then, almost despite himself, his gaze drifted to Section 104. There, amidst the collective delirium, sat Mr. Thompson. Utterly alone. He wasn't celebrating, wasn't acknowledging the pandemonium, wasn't even engaged with the game. Still as a statue, hands clasped in his lap, his focus remained on the players with an intensity that seemed to reach beyond the mere sport. He seemed disconnected. Alone, granite outcropping in a torrent of team spirit. Something stirred in Leo, an emotion difficult to define. Pity, perhaps, but tinged with a vague discomfort. The man's lack of response was unsettling. While everyone around him succumbed to the frenzy, Mr. Thompson appeared, aloof. The quarterback launched a soaring pass, an elongated spiral against the night. The crowd's eruption rivaled the fireworks as the receiver snagged the ball just inside the end zone. Leo felt a jolt of pure adrenaline, the shared ecstasy washing over him. He glanced back at Mr. Thompson. Unmoved. Unblinking. His face remained an enigma, as if he were witnessing a historical drama rather than a vibrant, live event. Leo shifted, the chill of the concrete seeping through the soles of his boots. It's none of your concern, he reminded himself. The man had a ticket, he had the right to sit as he wished. Yet, the image of that solitary figure, adrift in a sea of celebration, lodged in his throat. He tried to refocus on the game, on the intricate ballet of athleticism and strategy unfolding below. But his eyes kept returning to Section 104. He noticed the way the stadium lights caught the glint of Mr. Thompson's silvered hair, the network of fine lines around his eyes, the reserved dignity in his bearing. Another touchdown for the home team. The stands quaked with joyous abandon. A confetti storm erupted, swirling in the manufactured breeze. Leo watched as a young boy, barely 8, offered Mr. Thompson a high five. The older man offered a slight smile in return, but it was a reflex, a polite gesture that lacked genuine warmth. A sharp, unfamiliar pang resonated in Leo's chest. Guilt? He quickly suppressed it. He'd done his job. He'd verified the ticket. He'd secured the perimeter of the VIP section. There was no logical reason for him to feel guilty. But the sensation lingered, an uncomfortable knot in his gut. He couldn't dislodge the picture of Mr. Thompson, a quiet observer in a vortex of deafening exuberance. The game marched onward, the score escalating, the excitement reaching fever pitch. But the thrill had lost its sharp edge for Leo. The solitary figure in Section 104 had somehow dimmed the spectacle, a subtle whisper that there were other things beyond the roar of the crowd. Seventh inning surprise. The seventh inning crawled by like a wounded snail. Leo leaned against the gate, chewing on a toothpick, his gaze sweeping the crowd. Still no sign of trouble, just the usual overpriced hot dogs and lukewarm beer. He'd almost convinced himself Mr. Thompson was harmless, a harmless old codger with a penchant for baseball. Almost. Then the organ music swelled, a cheesy rendition of Take Me Out to the Ballgame blasting through the stadium speakers. The seventh inning stretch. Finally. Leo straightened, eager for the break, eager to see the old man shuffle off to wherever old codgers shuffle off to. The music faded, replaced by the booming voice of the stadium announcer. All right, folks, let's give it up for our veterans in attendance tonight. A polite smattering of applause rippled through the stands. Leo remained impassive. He'd heard it all before, every game, every season. Empty gestures, hollow praise. And tonight, the announcer continued, his voice deepening with a manufactured sincerity, we have a very special guest with us. A true American hero. He served our country with distinction, earning numerous commendations for his bravery and sacrifice. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to." A dramatic pause hung in the air. "Sergeant Major Arthur Thompson." Leo froze. The toothpick snapped between his teeth. Thompson? The name slammed into him like a rogue fastball. It couldn't be. There had to be 1,000 Thompsons in this city, 1,000,000 in the country. But the uneasy feeling in his gut told him otherwise. A spotlight sliced through the twilight, landing on a figure standing near home plate. Leo squinted, trying to get a better look. He could make out the silhouette of a man, tall and ramrod straight, his posture unwavering even from this distance. He wore a dark suit and something that glinted, medals, on his chest. The crowd roared, a wave of genuine appreciation washing over the stadium. Leo's ears rang, the sound blurring into a dull hum. He watched, his muscles tense, as the figure raised a hand in acknowledgement, a simple, dignified gesture that spoke volumes. "Mr. Thompson. Sergeant Major Arthur Thompson." His mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of the frail old man he'd encountered at the gate with the decorated war hero bathed in the spotlight. The quiet dignity, the stoic demeanor, the observant eyes. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. He'd been so focused on the man's age, his perceived vulnerability, that he'd completely missed the quiet strength that radiated from him. He felt a flush creep up his neck. He dismissed him, judged him, treated him with suspicion. And all the while, the announcer was still talking, rattling off a list of Thompson's achievements, medals, and campaigns. The words blurred together, meaningless noise compared to the stark realization that had just hit Leo. He had severely misjudged this man. And he had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. A hero's welcome. The announcer's voice boomed, a saccharine drone that usually made Leo's teeth ache. Tonight, it felt like a prelude to doom. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a true American hero. A man who dedicated his life to service, who stared into the face of danger and never wavered. Please put your hands together for Arthur Thompson. A single spotlight, blindingly bright, sliced through the swirling haze of the auditorium. It landed square on Mr. Thompson, still standing near the entrance, the VIP pass clutched in his weathered hand. Leo's jaw went slack. The old man didn't flinch. He simply straightened, his posture becoming impossibly erect, his shoulders pulling back as if he were a cadet again. The light, rather than exposing him, seemed to illuminate something already present, a quiet strength that Leo had completely missed. Then Leo saw them. Not at first, because they were subtle, almost hidden by the lapel of his worn tweed jacket. But as Mr. Thompson turned his head slightly, the light caught them, a cascade of medals, miniature suns glinting with unimaginable stories. The Distinguished Service Cross. The Silver Star. Purple Hearts, more than one. Each one a testament to courage, sacrifice, and unimaginable pain. A wave of nausea washed over Leo. He remembered his curt words, his impatience, the barely veiled contempt in his voice. VIP access only applies if you have the pass, sir. He'd treated this man like a common gatecrasher, an annoyance to be dismissed. The applause started slowly, a ripple at first, then a thunderous roar that shook the very foundations of the building. People were on their feet, their faces alight with admiration and gratitude. Even from this distance, Leo could see the genuine emotion etched on their faces. Mr. Thompson didn't acknowledge the applause with a wave or a smile. He simply stood there, a silent sentinel, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the cheering crowd, perhaps lost in memories of faraway battlefields and fallen comrades. The stark contrast between the man he perceived and the reality that now blazed before him was unbearable. Leo felt a burning shame creep up his neck, staining his face with hot embarrassment. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows and be swallowed whole by the floor. He'd judged a book by its cover, and in doing so, he'd insulted a hero. He'd dismissed a lifetime of service with a sneer and a bureaucratic technicality. The weight of his error settled heavily on his chest, a suffocating burden of guilt. His hand instinctively went to his own chest, touching the cheap, plastic name tag that proclaimed him Leo Maxwell, Event Security. The irony was a bitter pill. He was supposed to be protecting this event, ensuring the safety and comfort of its attendees. Instead, he'd humiliated one of the most deserving guests of all. He watched, paralyzed, as Mr. Thompson was escorted towards the stage, the spotlight following his every move. The announcer was practically gushing now, his voice thick with forced emotion. But Leo barely heard him. He was too busy replaying the scene in his head, each word, each gesture, magnified and distorted by his newfound understanding. Beyond appearances. Leo chewed the inside of his cheek, the metallic tang of anxiety coating his tongue. He'd spent the last half hour avoiding eye contact with the old man by the east window, but the guilt was a persistent itch he couldn't scratch. Mr. Thompson hadn't moved, hadn't complained, just sat there, a quiet island in the morning rush. Now, the lunch crowd was thinning, and Leo knew he couldn't put it off any longer. He pushed away from his console, the chair groaning in protest. Each step felt heavier than the last. The scent of lukewarm coffee and day-old pastries clung to the air as he approached. Mr. Thompson was staring out the window, the pale sunlight etching the lines on his face deeper. He looked older. More fragile. Leo cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson?" The old man turned, his blue eyes surprisingly sharp, assessing. Not accusing, just seeing. Leo stammered, "Look, I wanted to apologize. About this morning. About the seat. I was out of line." He winced. It sounded weak, pathetic even. He hadn't rehearsed it, the words were raw and clumsy. Mr. Thompson's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. He held up a hand, the skin loose on the bone, the movement surprisingly firm. "Son, don't trouble yourself. No offense taken." Leo frowned. "But I practically accused you of lying." Mr. Thompson chuckled, a dry, rustling sound like leaves skittering across pavement. "Accusations are like raindrops, son. Some soak in, some roll right off. Yours rolled." He gestured towards the empty expanse beside him. "I prefer this spot." Leo hesitated, still uncomfortable. "But it's out of the way. And, usually reserved." Mr. Thompson sighed, a puff of air that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Quiet here. Helps me remember." He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The silence hung heavy between them, thick with unspoken stories. Leo glanced around. The hum of the building, the distant chatter, the clatter of keyboards, it all faded, replaced by an imagined symphony of distant gunfire and shouted commands. He swallowed hard, understanding dawning. Not fully, not completely, but enough. "Remember who?" he asked, the question barely a whisper. Mr. Thompson looked out the window again, his gaze distant. "Friends. Brothers. Those who didn't come home." He paused, his voice dropping even lower. "This little corner, with its lousy view of the loading dock, is the closest I get to their company these days. A moment of peace. A silent toast." He tapped the worn armrest. "More comfortable than a cemetery, and warmer than a cold stone." Leo felt a flush of shame creep up his neck. He'd been so caught up in rules and regulations, in the perceived importance of his job, that he'd completely missed the man standing, or rather, sitting, right in front of him. He'd judged him based on appearances, on assumptions, on his own narrow worldview. He nodded slowly. I understand, sir." He paused again, then added, "Thank you for your service." It felt inadequate, a hollow phrase, but it was the best he could muster. Mr. Thompson merely nodded in return, his eyes still fixed on the grey sky. Leo took a step back, a profound sense of humility settling over him. He had a lot to learn. A lot to understand. He turned and walked back to his console, the chair no longer groaning but sighing softly as he sat. The smell of coffee seemed less acrid, the sounds of the building less intrusive. The world, somehow, felt different. He was different. A quiet kindness. The stadium's roar faded to a low hum as the second half commenced. A hot flush of shame crept up Leo's neck. He hadn't just misread the old man, he'd been downright callous. He risked a glance at Mr. Thompson, whose gaze was fixed on the gridiron. Immobile, his face remained an inscrutable mask. Leo's throat constricted. Retrieving a water bottle from the cooler, he approached the man with hesitant steps. "Sir," he mumbled, extending the offering. "Care for some water? And, peanuts? Got some peanuts here." Mr. Thompson swiveled, his eyes, pools of startling cerulean, finding Leo's. No censure resided there, just a calm knowing. "That's kind of you, son. Water would be welcome." He accepted the bottle with a curt nod, his age-worn hand momentarily brushing Leo's. Throughout the remaining plays, Leo found himself instinctively catering to Mr. Thompson's comfort. He flagged noteworthy replays on the Jumbotron, anticipating the man's needs before they surfaced as requests. Another water, a small bag of nuts, even a moist towel to dab the sheen from his brow after a particularly nerve-wracking play. Each small act was answered with a reserved, almost noble, inclination of the head. The home team clinched victory in a nail-biter, unleashing pandemonium in the stands. As the throng pushed toward the exits, Leo assisted Mr. Thompson to stand. "Thank you, son," Mr. Thompson rumbled, his voice gravelly yet strong. "For your consideration." Leo's face burned, his eyes darting away. "It was nothing, sir." Mr. Thompson paused, his blue gaze locking onto Leo once more. "Service," he stated, the word resonating in the bustling air. "Genuine service isn't defined by the uniform or the accolades. It's about recognizing a need and fulfilling it, without expectation of return. And remembering that everyone, regardless of outward appearances, carries burdens unseen." He tapped his chest lightly, over his heart. "We're all just navigating this world, son. Don't judge a soul by their exterior. You never know the story within." With those words, Mr. Thompson turned and, with unexpected nimbleness, forged a path through the dispersing mass. Leo watched him disappear, the old man's wisdom reverberating in his thoughts. The stadium lights seemed to dim, painting elongated shadows that danced around his feet. The weight of his prior arrogance descended. He had been so quick to prejudge, so blinded by his own presumptions. Mr. Thompson hadn't castigated or demanded repentance. Instead, he offered gentle benevolence, a lesson imparted with grace and humility. Leo surveyed the emptying stands, the scattered peanut shells and discarded programs strewn across the concrete. The scene acquired new significance. Not a mere chaotic mess, but a tableau of individual narratives, each person bearing their own hopes, anxieties, and histories. And he, Leo Maxwell, had been too busy minding the gate to truly see. A new path. The scent of stale coffee clung to Leo as he pushed open the heavy door of the Veterans Outreach Center. He'd spent the better part of the last week replaying his encounter with Mr. Thompson, the veteran he'd initially dismissed. The old man's quiet dignity had chipped away at Leo's cynicism, leaving a hollow space where suspicion used to reside. He needed to fill it with something, anything, that wasn't the bitter aftertaste of his own judgment. A sign taped to the counter read, "Volunteers needed, make a difference." He felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a hope, maybe? He approached the counter, where a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile was sorting through stacks of pamphlets. "Hi," Leo said, his voice rough. "I'm here to, volunteer." The woman's smile widened. "That's wonderful. I'm Emily. We can always use an extra pair of hands." She gestured to a clipboard. "Just fill this out, and we'll find a spot for you." Leo scanned the form, surprised by the simplicity of the questions. Name, address, phone number, skills. Skills? He frowned. Security experience, he offered hesitantly. Emily's eyes lit up. "Actually, that could be really helpful. We sometimes have events where we need someone to manage the flow of people, ensure everyone feels safe." But more importantly, she leaned forward, her voice dropping conspiratorially, "We need people who can listen." He raised an eyebrow. "Listen?" "Yes. Many of our veterans just want someone to talk to. Someone who will hear their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. It's about connection, about reminding them that they're not alone." As he filled out the form, Emily explained the center's mission. They offered everything from job training and housing assistance to counseling and recreational activities. They organized outings to museums, hosted weekly game nights, and even helped veterans navigate the complex bureaucracy of VA benefits. "We try to create a community here," Emily said, her voice filled with passion. "A place where veterans feel valued and respected." Leo, used to seeing people as potential threats, found himself strangely moved by her words. He thought of Mr. Thompson, sitting alone on that bench, his stories locked inside. Emily led him on a tour of the center. The walls were adorned with photographs, smiling faces of veterans, both young and old, in uniform and out. A group of men were gathered around a table in the corner, engaged in a heated game of chess. The air buzzed with a quiet energy, a sense of camaraderie that surprised him. "We have a waiting list for volunteers," Emily said, snapping him out of his reverie. "But I think your security experience and willingness to listen will be invaluable. How about you start next week, helping out with the Tuesday afternoon group?" He nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "Yeah, I can do that." Leaving the center, the setting sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. He paused, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. The world felt different, somehow. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper. He realized he'd been so focused on protecting himself, on building walls, that he'd forgotten to look beyond them. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick text to his sister, promising to come over for dinner next week. Then, he walked towards his car, a new path stretching out before him, one step at a time. He still had much to learn, and many mistakes to make, but for the first time in a long time, Leo felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could become a better man.